Loud this time. Let's see how that works. All right. Welcome everybody to a Common Sense reading series. For those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Jordan Stempelman. This is my 11th year of hosting a Common Sense reading series out of Kansas City, Missouri. And before we begin, I want to attend to some just virtual reading housekeeping. I've already made Diannely and Caryl hosts, but if you could make sure that your microphones are muted. I believe that I've set this up as a default setting upon entry, but just in case, just make sure your mics are off so there's no feedback. And if you want to view the reader as they're reading, go ahead and please click on speaker view, and that should spotlight the reader. I think because I'm recording, if I do that, it should do that as well, but we'll see. Okay, just making sure no one's trying to get in and they're stuck outside. So as I said, this is my 11th year hosting Common Sense reading series, and this is the third virtual reading with all the readings this fall and spring conducted virtually. February's readers will be Kiki Petrosino and BJ Saloy. Information as well as a registration link for all the upcoming readings will be found on my website at jordanstempelman.com. It's under the Common Sense reading tab, and I try to put those up a couple weeks after the previous reading. And I want to acknowledge that this event was made possible by generous contributions from the Kansas City Art Institute Gallery, the Center for Contemporary Practice, and the creative writing programs at the Kansas City Art Institute. Before I introduce tonight's readers, please know that we've reserved time after the reading, about 15 minutes or so, for a Q&A. So while the readers are reading or immediately following the reading, you can feel free to post any questions you have into the comment box, and I'll go through those questions and I'll present them to the readers, or they might, hopefully they can read them themselves as well and think about them and answer them. So let's get started. Our first reader tonight is Diannely Antigua. And it looks like there are a couple more people who I need to let in. I'll do that. Okay. All right, so Diannely Antigua is a Dominican-American poet and educator, born and raised in Massachusetts. Her fantastic debut collection, Ugly Music, released by Yes Yes Books in 2019, was the winner of the Pamet River Prize and a 2020 Whiting Award. She received her BA in English from the University of Massachusetts, Lowell, where she won the Jack Kerouac Creative Writing Scholarship, and received her MFA at NYU, where she was awarded a Global Research Initiative Fellowship to Florence, Italy. She is the recipient of additional fellowships from Canto Mundo, Community of Writers, and the Fine Arts Works Center Summer Program. Her work has been nominated for both the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net. Her poems can be found in Washington Square Review, Bennington Review, the Adroit Journal, and elsewhere. She wants you to know that her heart is in Brooklyn, and I'm glad that her heart is with us tonight here across the interweb sphere. Please welcome Diannely Antigua.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you for that introduction. My bio says my heart's in Brooklyn, which it is, or part of my heart is there. I should edit that. But my body right now is in New Hampshire, which is where I've been living for quite some time. But Brooklyn definitely does have a piece of my heart for sure. So thank you all for joining tonight on this Saturday evening. Thank you again, Jordan, and I'm so excited to be reading with you, Caryl. Can't wait to hear your poetry. I'm gonna be reading tonight from my collection, Ugly Music, and I'll kind of start with poems at the beginning and kind of work my way through the narrative a bit, and then I'll end with a poem that is not in the book. And just as a content warning for these poems, some of them do deal with some heavy topics, such as mental illness, sexual abuse, and trauma. Re-education. I listen to podcasts to learn about feminism, watch porn to make sure I'm doing it right. I dance on the bar because coyote ugly, because these shoes and this drink. I'm almost 30, and I still think Bloody Mary is a game with a mirror. Sometimes she appears at 2 a.m. Sometimes she's in the toilet, kiss reflection before the flush. There is a truth in this magic. The time I took Plan B, then the other time I took Plan B, I bled for 2 months. There could have been a mother in me, and I told no one except the man at Tacos Lupita who asked what I wanted in my burrito, and I think I said baby. I think I spun around 3 times and whispered a name. And there was no floor when I fell, when a queen flew from my womb. There was glass and napkins and the doctor saying, wake up, wake up. This next poem is titled Day of Pentecost, and it refers to, in the Bible, the Day of Pentecost in which the disciples received the gift of speaking in tongues, or the gift of the Holy Ghost, after Jesus' crucifixion and then resurrection. I grew up very religious, and this is a poem about some of that experience. Day of Pentecost. It was August in Canada when it happened. They told me if I prayed, it would come like a flame on my tongue. I was 10, almost 11. I want to say I remember the smell of the sisters, their breath in my ear as they prayed, their little wails placed their hands on my back, on my pink flowered dress. I want to say I was sweating as the beads turned white on my skin, toes slick, slipping in my heels. I want to say I got the Holy Ghost to a Vertical Horizon song, not the guitar, not the singers in the sanctuary. Maybe it was the song, the best I ever had. My Walkman low on batteries, still on the ride from Haverhill. I want to say I was crying about a boy, or about the hole in my nylons, or my dirty city sneaks. I want to understand why my tongue moved, and a voice came out, and the voice said nothing, like something important, and maybe shamala, 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 hi, and maybe that meant save me, or leave me, or maybe it was make me disappear. Ars Poetica. The first time was an accident. How the edge of the couch felt watching cartoons in a wet bathing suit. Or when I hugged my green teddy bear, its fuzzed leg resting in the split of mine. Maybe it was bouncing on his knee, trot, trot to Boston, trot, trot to Maine, when I fell into feeling good. No, it was when I lay on her thigh and we rubbed our skin into pennies, newly flattened on a train track. This next poem is entitled Beauty Lesson. And I have a lot of poems about my mother, and she's been such a wonderful supporter of my work since the beginning. And this is just one of the many poems that includes her. Beauty Lesson. In the middle of her forehead, between her brows, my mother placed a piece of Scotch tape to keep from furrowing, from wrinkles, from expressing anything other than joy. Once I taped down my eyelids so I could stop seeing him. He wasn't my father, but shared her queen bed and had arguments about remotes. The day of his brain surgery, my mother cried. I was playing with Barbie dolls, cutting their limbs, poking them with sewing pins, and my brother shaved their heads. Then I sliced open soft skulls, like I'd done this before, like scissors breaking through the skin of a diabetic toe. When I'd hunch over my stepfather's feet, fingers to the metal handle, I'd miss the nail and take with me a little blood. On their wedding day, from the top stair, I don't know what he yelled, but I tried to hold my mother back. I was too small. She followed him down to the hallway, to the bedroom, petticoat rustling behind her. This next poem is a diary entry poem, and throughout my book, Ugly Music, I have what are labeled diary entry poems, and then they have a corresponding number. And those are actually poems that are all collage poems written using journals that I've written in since I was 9 years old. My older sister gifted me a journal when I was younger, and now I've been using those as material to build the poems, kind of like little building blocks, and this is one of those poems. Diary entry number 4, Pagel. Then I did something I didn't think I could do. Dear God, I thought about suicide, then my algebra homework, then maybe something else godly, how I was going to fast and pray for a language to explain last Wednesday. I'm no God, but I'm trying to dust off the ashes of the change. I got my period and I feel less godlike, an unclean romance in my body, how I cupped my hands to catch whatever came. Little bit of God's blood escaping my vagina, or how the idea of cutting a wrist might lead to more goddess. Dr. Rosenblum says, I need a counselor, says I am officially broken, that I will pick up a knife to cut the God spell out of me. I tell him there's a mouth in my underwear wadded with tissue. It sings beautiful things when it's touched. It sings, oh God. Post-concussion. After her accident, my mother forgot my name, started calling out with the wrong letters, her tongue rolling R's, her jaw and teeth out in a J. She'd fallen in the driveway, the bridge of her nose holding her weight, arms fanned out like Christ. She probably said his name then too, Jesus, in prayer to the pavement forsaking her feet. The doctor said that happens when we get older. We are helpless to the invisible. He said she'd forget things for a while. The bread at the grocery store, the telephone bill, the stove's blue flame left overnight under a pan. We woke up that next morning, still alive. The dog still alive. The pan only burnt at the bottom. The air a stale haze of gas. But I cried anyway and wondered who'd saved us and if we'd even been saved at all. If somewhere we were burning blue and orange, the peaks of fire like crayon leaf rubbings, the paper, the veins, or some celestial child discovering flame, magnifying glass held high above, smoke rising from our heads. Diary entry number 22, vows. I'm trying to be my own father with a shotgun, but I have a limit. I've been holding too many hands under the table at McDonald's. They are taking all my air. I know we won't reproduce, but I want to believe in a miracle child. My niece, tear in the placenta, and still here. What is it to be so attracted to someone that you want to create a collection? Will they be brown like me? Will they run barefoot on the kitchen floor into my arms, to my breasts? I won't turn from their mouths. What if I get sick again? I am chemical in a way. My vertebrae can't recall the point of climax. When my lover said, babe, that was a beautiful fucking church, I dropped a cereal box. I'm trying to remember why I'm here. The house with the gables and brick. I am a sinner with feelings. I am the father. A death brings people closer together. All right, I have two more poems for you. One's a little bit longer and then one very short one. Variations on a theme. When my mother says I was born on a Wednesday like my new niece, I tell her the babies keep me on earth a little longer. I have to see their faces before I die. Then I tell her I must love or die. My body can't be alone for more than a month. I need a bedfellow for the healing, bedfellow for each season above the ground. She laughed a little between tears, and I stay silent. It's not the end, I want to say, as I reach for her hand. I want to say, Mom, I'm in the bad order, the order of fire, then relief. I want to say, we don't get to pick what wrecks us. This little straw joins the other last straws. When the dozen eggs became none, or the crumbs fell like David's star to 6 different points in the room, and in the center, my mind thrashed in a crib made of bone. I want to say that a mother who was not my mother gave me a gift, a bracelet, a blue checkered gown, the rehearsed opera of my rights. I want to say there are so many Wednesdays left to cry on. If I would have known then how many Wednesdays it would take to die, if I would have known all the Wednesdays I'd be given back. There is a song playing on the radio when I finally apologize to myself. I can't make out the words, but it feels like forgiveness. Listen, I'm a stupid whore and I'm sorry. I tried to hang myself and I'm sorry. If a piano could cure a life, let it be this one. I remember the 2 fish I colored in at the hospital looked like they were kissing my hand. And it felt soft, like my own lips smushed up against a mirror. And it was wet, as if the ocean had lived inside me and I just discovered the first wave. And for my last poem is a little short one that you may or may not have seen. It appeared in Poem a Day last month for Latinx Heritage Month. It's called Anniversary. Outside, an abandoned mattress sags with rain, and the driveway turns all sludge. When I remember I could have died 8 years ago in a bed smaller than the one I share with a new lover who just this morning found another gray hair in my afro. And before resettling the wiry curl with the others, kissed the freckle on my forehead. I admit, I don't know a love that doesn't destroy. Last night, while we slept, a mouse drowned in the rice pot I left soaking in the sink. I tried to make a metaphor out of this, the way he took the mouse to the edge of the lake in the yard, released it to a deeper grave. It was an anniversary, just my lover taking a dead thing away, taking it somewhere I couldn't see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diannely. That was really incredibly moving. Yeah, I've got some questions for you. That was great. So our next reader is going to be Caryl Pagel. And Caryl is the author of Out of Nowhere into Nothing, which was just released by Fiction Collective 2. She's also the author of Twice Told from University of Akron Press and Experiments I Should Like Tried at My Own Death from Factory Hollow. She teaches at the Northeast Ohio Masters of Fine Arts program, directs the Cleveland State University Poetry Center, and is a publisher and editor of Rescue Press. Please welcome Caryl Pagel.
Thank you, Jordan. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I thought I'd start there. I'm so glad that you're continuing this series during pandemic times. It's been so great to watch the readings that came before ours. And thanks so much, Diannely, for that reading. It was really beautiful, as is Ugly Music. Congratulations on it. So I'm gonna read from Out of Nowhere into Nothing, which is a new collection of mine of essays. And I'm going to read from an essay called Paul Revere's, and it's a little bit of a remix of the essay. The essay is told in discrete vignettes, and so it's a remix just purely because I've rearranged the order of the vignettes. The only real reason to know that is just that I'm going to start each one with a number, and it corresponds to where it originally appears in the essay. So it's called Paul Revere's. 4. Directly before their first date, if you could call it that, which they did with starry eyes months later, although she hadn't imagined it that way at the time because did he have a girlfriend? No one would tell. She fainted hard into the arms of a hospital nurse. It took several moments longer than it should have to revive her. When she came to after a long and tangled while, her mind was vacant. She couldn't recall her name, where she was, or anything that had occurred before that instant. In a cold sweat, having greatly alarmed the worried nurse, she stood up and walked out the door, then continued more than a mile in the blazing summer sun to meet him at a dive bar on Market. She was polite and thought it unseemly to cancel with such short notice. 14. Everyone shares a therapist. This means that we are obligated to manipulate stories when discussing one or another of the people the therapist also sees, most of whom happen to be the very people we wish to speak about, the people who are making us ill. Pills lace the water. The songs we hum are sad songs. For a year now, there has been a pronounced gas leak in the apartment where we congregate for late night dance parties. Someone passes out on the lawn. Occasionally, the medicine helps, but mostly it is the process that confuses things. We are continually finding doctors, leaving messages, calling back, driving to the pharmacy, feeling better, slowly plateauing, definitely drowning, looking like shit, mixing medications, drinking too much, developing addictions, sharing prescriptions, stealing drugs, lying to loved ones, and in search of better insurance. We are barely ever ourselves, and our personalities are verbal in the worst ways. We are suffering from predictable side effects. Once, many years ago, before her first book, her teaching job, and the birth of her now young son, Elle discovered and promptly popped a random pill she found on the fuzzy floor of Paul Revere's women's bathroom. It was a pizza shop. She returned to the table and we all stared at her beautiful face, waiting patiently for something to happen. 32. Chicken with lemon, onion, garlic, sriracha, mustard, salt, pepper, oil, burnt. Add avocado, apple, almonds, goat cheese, any fruit, vegetables, lettuce, herbs. 2. The child might never have come out of the woods of his own accord. His family was attending an outdoor Boy Scout ceremony for his older brother, and the little boy was playing sweetly with several children his own age in a clearing behind them. The boy followed another kid after a ball that was tossed to the edge of the field, and when he arrived there, at the boundary of the forest, he stepped in. The mother and father instigated a frantic search involving the entire troop of scouts and the local police force. It took several hours to retrieve him. They combed the woods in organized clusters, calling his name at the top of their lungs, but the boy never thought, never even considered, that he was lost or in trouble. He had by then adjusted to the dim, low glow of the forest, clawing shallow holes in the earth and chatting with fallen branches. He was, and still is, the kind of person instantly content being nowhere. 7. This morning in a high-rise building in Chicago, I watched a man crawl down the ladder beneath a stopped elevator and into the mysterious underbelly of the interior to fetch the car keys of a woman who had dropped them into the slim 1-inch crack between sliding door and tile floor. There are some things I am vigilant about. Minding the gap, crossing the street, slowing down, holding on. 22. Pink and red wash, copper scribble of a passed out drunk, faint green pressing up from the lower left-hand corner. Hair-thin charcoal scratches in soft gray light to the right. Pronounced perfect bourbon bottles rendered in oil, pencil lines, canvas grain. I click on more links. I am watching young men throw boiling pots of water into the air. Water flies into the ether, and due to scientific principles I don't understand, instantaneously morphs into smoke. In Hendrik Averkamp's winter landscape with ice skaters, an entire town drifts aimlessly across an icy field. Yesterday morning on the corner of Gilbert and Davenport, I slid for an instant on the sidewalk and nearly split my skull open. No one saw. Now I examine the backs of 2 children perched on a boat in the foreground. Crows peck at the corpse of a frozen horse. When I saw this painting for the first time many years ago in the dim light of an art museum in Amsterdam, I swore to myself that I'd never forget it. I did though, for 2 years, and then I remembered. 30. I turn on the television. I see an adult man watching television. An adult woman is watching the adult man watch television. She asks, "Is there anything that you want? Is there anything that I can get you?" He doesn't respond. I came here in a charitable mood. I turn it off. 29. They laughed so hard they cried, they almost died. They broke up. It took the better part of an hour to find the woman's used blue Rabbit at the mall, both of them having forgotten where they'd parked it. The man told the story, one she'd heard several times, of how his grandfather, adrift in a dangerous Colorado blizzard, survived by chewing on thin slices of the elk he'd shot at the start of the whiteout. In the mall, the woman tried on a gold dress made of glitter. The man bought 2 shirts. There wasn't a good place to be, wrote Leonard Michaels in his diaries, but I couldn't leave. 5. We forget nothing. When one person does, we remind them. Washed up from different cities, separate institutions, various affairs, our entire purpose, our total responsibility, it seems, is to remain in a constant state of telling. Repeating this story or that, maintaining the notorious gory details, keeping histories alive, afloat, aloft, within so-called earshot, performing the dramatic finales. 17. In this episode of The Real Housewives of New Jersey, the cast has gone to a castle to sort things out. The characters keep mentioning trust falls. Even though she was invited, Jacqueline has decided not to join because, so she says straight into the camera, she's so over it. The group counselor looks upset. The entire family is roaming around the grounds with their spray tan skin and overdressed children, and Teresa's husband says something seriously offensive about autism. When your parents die, another character remarks, all you have left are your siblings. I'm briefly touched. Later, someone throws a half-hearted punch at someone else, and a third person calls, "It's like speaking to a wall," in the direction of nothing else. 34. Kay finds a key in the rock. Dee throws a butterfly knife through the crowd of drunken dancers. Someone barfs in the garden. A makes mimosas for the shower. We got ourselves into this mess, that's for sure. We're the only ones to blame. Day after day, it's the same. One day, I am thinking of a young Martin Sheen dashing with high knees through the woodlands, cradling a shotgun against his bare chest, while Sissy Spacek, all freckles and calm, waits for him in a treehouse. They've recently murdered. The famous poet is sitting next to me while we watch a famous novelist read. Afterwards, I am introduced to everyone. We walk to the bar and a large group of glow-in-the-dark, skull-masked strangers jump out at me from the shadows. Surprise, they scream. 21. Games we play. Cracker, lime, or nothing. MVW. The fake goodbye. Cannoli pepperoni. Bags. Beads, beads, beads. Inside or outside. Small or far away. The all crawl. Euchre. The podcast. P.O. Blank. Team babes. Act natural. You put me in a situation. The West Wing whistle. What's more similar? In Racine. Soft G's. The deepest V. You dropped a dot. BOGO package. Old man dance. Egyptian rat fuck. Better one, better two. Face swap. Option man. Little Women. See You in Hell. Boop. The Years and Hours of Emily Dickinson. 13. M leans in conspiratorially. She manages the only great restaurant in town, the one on Lynn Street across from the paper, the one with the gorgeous waitstaff. We go to their theme parties, leave big tips, and try foolishly to seduce them. Unlike writers, you see, they have jobs. My mother, M confesses, after telling a funny story involving a miscommunication at a train station, won't stop eating gummy bears. They're making her sick. She's posted signs all around the house, on mirrors, furniture, doors, instructing, no more gummies. I laugh out loud. The buildings in this town used to be other things, mostly hospitals. Thanks.
Thank you, Caryl. It was so great to hear you read. It's been a while. It's been a while. So I've got some questions, but if you all in the audience have some as well, please type them into the chat box and I will field those. I mean, this is one of the questions that I think I've asked the readers of the prior two readings as well, and that is, you know, how are you all responding in writing to the pandemic, to the election, to all the social unrest, to, you know, the fears of this, I don't even want to call it a coup at this point, but something that's out in the open that seems really nefarious. You know, how are you responding to maybe the lack of connection, or even the over connection, maybe the over connection with yourself or with those around you? How are you writing in the midst of all of that is something that I'm really interested in. You know, I read Zadie Smith's recent work. It's called Premonitions. Is that correct? I mean, her essay collection. Zadie Smith is kind of just writing in the midst of the pandemic, and so I thought it was really interesting and really brave to do that. You know, to try to make sense of something before all the facts are out or before you have time to think about something. So those are some things I have questions for you. Like, how are you responding right now, to put it more succinctly? And it doesn't matter. Whoever wants to go first can go. Feel free.
I guess I'll jump in. How am I responding? I haven't been doing a lot of writing, I guess, is like the easiest way of saying it. I think right when the pandemic started, I thought that suddenly maybe I'd have, I don't know, more room in my brain, which is foolish, just because of having to be at home or something like that. So I wrote a couple book reviews, my intention just being to try and like focus on one discrete like thing that I could finish. And I did that for a minute, and it felt nice. And then since then I've been really struggling. I don't know, I feel like my brain's all over the place, but I think that I feel admiration for what you're talking about, Jordan. Writers who are able to write about all of the things that are happening in real time or some approximation of that. And I guess I'd just say that earlier today, I finished reading an essay of Brian Blanchfield's that's new and up on the internet somewhere. It's called Fish Pole. And it's great. It's beautiful. And it was like one of, you know, it's about many things, as a lot of his essays and his writing is. And it's a little bit about the Mueller report and a little bit about Homer and a little bit about a kind of writing retreat that he was on. But it struck me that it was like one of the first things that I had read that was trying to tackle all of the things that you just mentioned. That was just really beautiful. So a reading suggestion.
Yeah, I find that, I can't write really directly about it either. I go on walks and sometimes I might think of something and I put it in my notes and then I move on. And then, that's about as much as I can do. Um, Diannely, what are your thoughts? How have you been responding?
Um, I think similar to what Caryl was talking about, like I haven't really been writing that much, at least in this kind of like later part of the pandemic. I think early on I had like some ambitions to write more, and I wrote about like a handful of poems at the very beginning. One being Anniversary, which I read at the end. So, I mean, even the fact that I got one good poem out of it, I'm very grateful for, because I think that my head has been elsewhere. Um, I think, well, just because of the situations that we're dealing with at hand, with the pandemic, with the election, with all of the unrest at the moment, but also like for good reasons too. I mean, I moved into my first apartment during the pandemic, so I've been kind of, my mind's been, busied with the kind of, bustle of all of that, purchasing new things and thinking about silverware and blinds and I think it's been something that's been a healthy preoccupation at the moment. I mean, granted, I do have my obsessions and nights where I stay up looking at Pinterest boards about silly things like baskets, but um, I feel like it's been a good way for me to kind of use up some of that nervous energy in a way that's still productive, but isn't and creative, but it's not necessarily writing, which I definitely need a creative outlet of some sort. And that's been a way that I can accomplish that without giving myself or putting myself under a lot of pressure to like produce. And I know people that have written, entire books. I read with Joshua Bennett a few weeks ago, and he wrote an entire book during the pandemic, which is coming out, and I think not next year, because I think he already has another book coming out next year, but I think the following year. So I mean, he's on a roll. And I do admire, people who are able to put pen to paper right now and express either, what they're feeling at the moment or just completely go in a different direction. But I'm hoping that like once I've kind of gotten over all of the whole buzz of the apartment, that I'll kind of settle into my new little office space that I have and be able to really use that to my advantage and create some new work. I won't say a new book just yet, but just some new work.
Yeah, I think of my students, and I teach art students, and especially the the juniors and seniors who no longer have a lot of constraint-based assignments. They're really asked to just go into their studios and make, and how difficult that has to be right now. Whereas with freshmen and we have a foundations program at the Art Institute. It is constraint based. It is assignment based. You'll make this box out of double-sided tape and whatever it may be. You'll make these forms, or you'll do certain self-portraits or whatever it may be. And I guess for one thing, I've always thought of constraints as being something that were so oppressive at one point. When an early poetry professor would say, you're going to write a cento, or you're going to write a sestina, or you're going to write an ode, and I just want to do my own shit, right? I just want to do my own shit. And the older I get, the more I try to put constraints on myself, different constraints to keep moving. I will, do something, because otherwise I'll do a type of nothing that only feeds to non-response or something, so I don't see any questions yet in the chat box, but I can keep going here, because I loved what you guys what you read from tonight, and I'm huge admirers of your work. And Caryl, you had that line, and I think this applies to both of you all, and I think it applies to everyone probably in the room to some degree, but you wrote, speaking about the people who are making us ill. And I thought about, yeah, that's a long list, right? But how do you both speak to or speak about those who make you ill? Because I notice, you know, that you're doing it, but how then do you speak about health as well? You know, and how do you speak through it? There's that great line, again, I'm going to reference Zadie Smith, but in her she wrote an essay a while back. It was a book review actually of, I think, Tao Lin and Nosgard, where she quoted, I can't remember who did she quote. She quoted Lacan, I believe, who said, "Trauma is a missed encounter with the real." And the idea of when we're traumatized by something, we go back to it so completely that the world disappears for us, and so we're no longer present because we're back to that trauma. So how do you all speak through or speak about those who are making you ill, and turn it into something that into the other, I guess? Diannely, you want to start there, and then Caryl, you can.
Sure. I think I'm like still thinking through it, so forgive me in advance if I'm kind of just thinking and talking. And so I guess your first question was, how do we speak to the idea of, you know, those who are making us ill, how we go about writing about it? And I feel like at least at the beginning of when I was writing, I wasn't actually writing about mental illness at all. I felt both a calling and an obligation, I guess, to write about my culture and being a woman of color and being Afro-Latinx. I felt very much like that was the only thing that was interesting about me, the only thing that was consumable in poetry or in literature. And I was only writing about that part of my identity for a while, and during writing my mother's story and you know, my relationship to language and being bilingual, and all of those things are great and wonderful, and I needed to write all of those poems. But I think I was denying myself access to write about another part of my identity, which is being someone with a mental illness and someone that has experienced trauma. So it wasn't until I started my MFA program at NYU where I actually gave myself the permission to explore that more, when before I felt like I was having to tell other people's stories. And I gave myself the permission to write about, I guess, to thinking about Caryl's work, those who had made me ill, those who were continuing to make me ill, even though they were no longer present in my life. Trauma is reoccurring. I mean, it's called post-traumatic stress disorder because you had that trauma and you're just almost continuing to live it. And I felt like poetry was both a way to, revisit and almost like re-traumatize myself, but then also through that, like I was also healing, if that makes any sense, because I was revisiting it on my terms, and it wasn't through some type of episode or like a flashback. I was choosing to go there, which to me felt really empowering, and allowed me to kind of sit in the driver's seat and to take control of that experience. When before a lot of, I had experienced a lot of trauma, and a lot of trauma had been done to me, and I had lost a lot of agency because of it. So I guess that's one thing that, writing about the people that have done harm has allowed me to be the teller of the story. And actually, Caryl, you said something too, that we're staying in a constant state of telling, which I thought was so beautiful. And I feel like, recently I've just been, or at least the Ugly Music, the collection was very much as a constant state of telling of the trauma over and over and over again in different ways and different forms. And I guess like I'm not that I'm done doing that, because I think I'll always be writing about the trauma in some way or another, whether it's like, the poem Anniversary, like thinking about how the trauma had happened 8 years ago. And now I'm trying to, at least the speaker in that poem is trying to have some type of semblance of joy, and kind of how there's even a struggle with that. And, personally, I feel sometimes like I'm always just trying to kind of grasp onto those feelings of joy in any way possible. They're right there in front of me in a lot of ways, but it's just kind of takes some time to notice them, and I guess allow myself that space and access to that part of myself too, because I am a joyous person. So I hope that my next collection allows for more poems about joy, but I don't think joy is just devoid of any type of trauma, or traumatic history. I think it's just having experienced trauma and then being able to notice the small pleasures even of living a life. So I'm hoping my next collection will be able to embody that in some capacity.
Thank you so much. Caryl, you have anything about that?
Yeah, that was a beautiful answer. I guess what I could add to it, thinking about the line that you referred to at the beginning, Jordan, just sort of like, being, it comes from this moment in that essay, which I wrote a while ago now, years and years ago, that was both serious and meant to maybe have some bit of humor in it, pointing to a group or a community of people who are all maybe suffering or not feeling great, or maybe having problems that are shared, that are in common, and how communities process that, like how we care for each other, or how we continue to be in the place of the telling when people are in pain, and then what kind of like loop, I guess, one gets into when no one's able to care for each other. The community I was referring to in that essay was just a small one, and that's just like a minor idea, but the larger idea seems particularly relevant right now, when you just know that everyone that you talk to all day long is maybe not doing well. And so, what do we do together through our writing or through our conversations to try to use art to alleviate some of that? I don't have the answers, but I guess I've just been thinking a lot about trauma or suffering or pain, just in a sort of communal sense, and a communal sense in writing too. Maybe just to talk about like one more piece of writing that's been on my mind, I think because I just taught it in a nonfiction class, is this book, Annie Ernaux's The Years. I'm not sure if either of you have read that book, but it's a memoir told from the first person plural through we, and it kind of goes through this woman's entire life, the decades that she's been alive. She's maybe in like her 70s or something now, and kind of encapsulates the various, I don't know, like issues of her generation, like one decade at a time, along with some personal narrative threads that are in there. I'm not doing a good job of like summarizing this book, but if everyone goes and reads it, then you'll know what I was talking about right now. But it's a community memoir, and it's dealing with sort of like community pain throughout her whole life, not just her own individual. So yeah.
No, that's great. I know I was trying to explain Sigrid Nunez's book recently to somebody, and I just said, oh shit, I don't know, it's like Amy Hempel, if Amy Hempel wrote a novel, but it's not like that. It reminds me of just it's like Laverne and Shirley dying together, or one of them dying. You know, it's just a horrible explanation. Okay, so I have one last question for you guys, and this is, what have you been doing right now to find joy in your life? Because you mentioned that, you know, Diannely, joy, and I think about, you know, what I've been doing, which is, you know, even, you know, being on these Zoom calls, or we use Google Meet with my students, and trying to play music before each class before I come in, and just finding soundtracks, or taking walks with my kids, or working on the shitty truck that I have that has rot everywhere. Or watching The Crown now. I started finally watching The Crown, and I'm loving it. So what are you guys doing? What are just a few things that you've been doing to find joy in your life right now, that you could recommend for others to perhaps find joy? Caryl, you want to start and just give a couple things that you're finding joy in right
Yeah,
now?
God, just off the top of my head. Maybe this is coming through. I'm a big reader. I can't help myself. I find pleasure in books, you know, and maybe that's something that this period of time that's been hard in so many ways has just like confirmed, is like that works for me. There has just like not been a period of time in my life where um it hasn't helped me get through like a mood to just sit down with whatever it is I'm reading. It almost doesn't even matter what, to be honest. Yeah, joy. I mean, all of my ways of finding joy maybe are the usual boring ones: taking long walks, hanging out with friends. You know, I've got a kid these days who's 1.5, and he is a real little weirdo. And so I feel like he brings a lot of joy. But yeah, what you're mentioning, Jordan, it's like, though things are rough, these, like, going to readings via Zoom has been really sweet. I've been able to see people who I would never be able to see in person, and connect, and, you know, meet new people that way. Um, Teaching, you know, like you're saying, I've always liked teaching, but it feels uh, maybe bizarrely and ironically sometimes more intimate these days. Just being able to like look at people for a couple of hours during your week. Yeah, so those are
Yeah,
the
we're all staring at each other. We're not staring at the back of each other's heads, you know, in the
yeah.
classroom. We all, you know, you have the faces there. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. Diannely, what's been bringing you joy these days?
Um, so I think I was talking about just my apartment has been bringing me some joy, though some obsessive weird joy at moments. And I mean, I think that I've always really enjoyed kind of like the idea of just creating art wherever possible. And like I said, the apartment has allowed me to just express myself in ways that I haven't really been able to before. You know, this being my first apartment on my own, so it's the whole space is all mine. So it has been really, really liberating to be able to, you know, choose the furniture and, you know, get my office space ready. And you know, I've gone to Michael's Crafts at least like every day, and it's just insane the amount of things that go into creating a home for yourself. And I am finding a lot of joy in it because it's something that I feel you know, took a really long time to get there, and it was definitely something that I actually never imagined I would have for myself. You know, thinking of mental illness, I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to live on my own. I wasn't ever sure if my family would ever let me live on my own, or if that I would be okay living on my own. So it's been really wonderful to be able to feel like I have a place that feels truly mine, that smells like me, that has the things that I love in it. I say all of this while I'm in my partner's home, but I do love my apartment. But I do love all of the smells and wonderful things that are here too. And he has a lovely little golden doodle that he got during the pandemic. So that's been bringing me joy too, little pandemic pup. And then some really mundane things have also been bringing me joy. Like I just find joy in watching reality TV and drinking a glass of wine. Like I think that's just a wonderful like waste of time, at least for me. And but it's also like strange watching reality TV because everything feels kind of like a social experiment. And so I find it really, really fascinating. And then I've discovered my love of fiction. I started reading fiction when I was a child, and that's kind of how I got into writing initially. And then I got kind of so involved in the poetry scene that just became everything that I was reading and consuming was either poetry or essays about poetry, and kind of forgot that at one point I truly loved fiction and specifically mysteries. And that's been something that I've been going back to, and it's like I devour those books like so quickly. I read a book in 1 or 2 days time, and it feels like I'm 15 again, and I'm sitting in the library, which my mother was a librarian, and I would go to work with her sometimes, just sitting there and reading while my mother would be working her shift, and just like waiting for her to tell me when it was time to come home. So it's brought like a lot of wonderful memories back, being able to sit and read fiction again. So that's what I've been doing.
No, that's great. Thank you both for being here and spending your evening, virtually with us. And yeah, this has just been wonderful. And I agree, Caryl, that I wouldn't have been able to see you guys in Kansas City probably, right? Unless you had a tour and you were coming through or something like that. So I love this format for that reason. And I kind of wonder about maybe integrating it moving forward, of alternating between in-person readings and then virtual readings, so I can bring people in who I wouldn't get to see or get to hear and whose work I truly admire. So anyway, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you Caryl and Diannely for spending your time with us tonight. And yeah, take care, be well everybody, and I'll see you again hopefully in February. All right.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Take care.